Welcome back to my channel. I'm Traben. These are my tomes, and this is everything I've read in the last 2 weeks, because I took a week off. Work is back in session, and I'm having to recalibrate my filming times, so I took last week off, but I'm back, and now it's time to talk about everything I read since last I updated you. Starting with Manga in Theory and Practice, which I mentioned I was partway through on the last video. This is one that I'm surprised more people aren't talking about because it is the only book I know of that is discussing manga specifically as like a business and from the side of the author. I'm sure more exist in Japan, and it just happens that this is the only one that we've translated. This comes from the author of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and it's basically advice to people who are wanting to write the same type of action shonen that he writes, although mixed in there is just a lot of really good general writing advice. This one was mostly good, although as an English teacher, someone who has taught literary criticism, I feel like there are some conclusions he reaches based on some of his examples that don't seem right, and I'm wondering if that is a translation error, or did they pull the wrong scene from the book, or is he just drawing wild conclusions? It's hard to tell because we're looking at a piece that was translated from another language into English, so there are a number of different ways that information could have become muddled. I think the best parts of this book are when he takes his actual work and dissects it and talks about what he was trying to accomplish with the individual panels or the flow of the page, things that you might not think of as a novice manga writer, because as he correctly points out early on in the book, with your drawing manga, you're not only having to tell a story through words, but also through visuals, the intersection of those two things, the way that your panels are laid out. There's a lot more that goes into it than just like putting a script to pictures. This is one I would definitely recommend for any of you out there that are doing manga analysis or are interested in getting into drawing comic books, or just for general writing advice, to have a different voice and a unique perspective that we might not get here in the West. It has inspired me to take a look at the very beginnings of manga, because one of the things he brings up very early in the book is how when you go into your pitch meeting, they will look at your cover page and like the first page of your work, and if it doesn't immediately grab them, they put it back in the envelope and they tell you they're not interested, because they're dealing with so many recommendations, they're dealing with so many people trying to get into this industry that they don't have time to read past that first page if it isn't immediately grabbing them, if it isn't immediately something they feel like they can put into their book. And so yeah, I want to look at just the first pages of manga, several different manga titles, and talk about what is it doing to establish the who, what, where, why, how of the book. I would definitely recommend this. Again, not all the advice I agreed with, but it was very interesting to get that perspective. From my local library, I picked up Jonna and the Unpossible Monsters, Volumes 1 and 2. They didn't have Volume 3, unfortunately, and I think this is a trilogy. I might be picking this one up for myself. I found it intriguing enough. This is another young reader comic that I came across randomly. I don't know what I was looking at that this cropped up, but it just, the name itself, Jonna and the Unpossible Monsters, intrigued me, and the premise sounded fun. It is very light. Again, this is like a middle grade read, but I had fun with it. It is the story of two sisters, Jonna and Rainbow, who you can see on the cover of the second book here. And Jonna is a very unique child. At the beginning of the book, they are running around and there is some sort of like branch, like brambles kind of thing that Jonna comes across, and then she sees this giant monster, and then it cuts to, I think, a year later. There's a time jump almost immediately afterwards, and Jonah's been missing, having, the last you've seen of her being jumping toward that giant monster. Rainbow's looking for her, and then it's just their misadventures as Jonna is rediscovered. We find out what happened when she confronted the monster, and then we find that society has become very different from how it was when the story began. You get the sense that these giant monsters are a new phenomenon, and at the very end of Volume 2, you get a kind of twist to the story that suggests that there's more to Jonna than you initially thought. So I found it intriguing. I found it fun. They're very light, very quick to get through. But again, I think I'm going to end up picking this up for myself to finish it. I really did like it, and the art is absolutely beautiful. Has this kind of simplistic style, but also one that's very fun and appropriate for what's going on. So here we have like the appearance of the first monster. Very vibrant, colorful. I liked it a lot. I'd recommend it if you're into like kaiju and that kind of storytelling. I also read Void Rivals Volume 3, which continues the story of Derek and Salila as they try to figure out what's going on with their unique world situation. They live on a giant ring, and we know now that there is basically a decree to keep the two sides of the ring always opposed to one another, to never unite them. And this volume, we actually find out the reason why, and it's tied in very directly to the Transformers lore. We get a couple of Transformers in here in this volume that seem like they're going to be more mainstays for a while. We ran across a few in, I think, volumes 1 and 2, but they were mostly cameos that then like jetted away. Here we get more of the like direct lore and backstory of the world. This is going to be for fans of Transformers, for those already reading the Skybound Transformers line. I believe also within this comic we get some characters that might be from G.I. Joe. I'm not sure because I haven't been reading that corner of this connected universe. But I plan on rectifying that soon because I'm having a lot of fun with both Void Rivals and the Transformers line that's coming from Skybound. So if you are a Transformers fan, or if you want to continue to explore that universe, I think Void Rivals is actually my favorite of the three major titles coming out from Skybound, from this company. So I would highly recommend it. It was a lot of fun. Very much like a space opera that's centered around the Transformers lore from like eons and eons ago. So a lot of fun. Check it out if that is your thing. Speaking of titles that fall into their own particular mythos, I read House of Slaughter Azure, which is volume 6 of the House of Slaughter series, and this one is probably the most esoteric and the most lore seeped volume that I've read so far. So if you're not familiar, House of Slaughter is an offshoot series from the Something is Killing the Children line, and it focuses on other members of this organization that is out there trying to kill monsters and ostensibly to keep humanity safe, although that's a secondary concern to the monster slaying in most cases. So this one deals with the Azure group, which is mostly concerned with like data management and like keeping information, like maintaining information, maintaining the books, information management, data management, that kind of thing for the group. They bring up at one point that not even everybody in this particular group is directly affiliated with the houses that are are in this organization, that they like contract out some of this, just have someone put something in a locker, or crunch some numbers, or do these little odd jobs for them. But this one is dealing with something that happened in a previous volume of House of Slaughter, which seems to be kind of the trend. I feel like the last one I read, which was about Butcher or Bouchard, it was like tied in with like volumes 1 and 3, and then 5 were all that connected story. This one I think goes back to, it might have been volume 4, can't remember, but the one that this is referencing was the most convoluted and difficult to follow comic so far. And while this does go a little way into clarifying what actually happened in that other very confusing volume, because you are dealing with the most esoteric, difficult to understand corners of this universe, I can only really recommend this if you're already like deep into the House of Slaughter lore. But if you are, then this I think was one of the better titles from House of Slaughter. I really liked it. I liked the character interactions. I liked, again, another deep dive into the lore behind the story, particularly with the reasons why each of the hunters keeps basically the soul of a monster inside of a stuffed animal or some sort of toy with them. Talks about that a little bit. Very cool, very weird, very hard to recommend if you're not already like deep into this universe, but a lot of fun if you are. My wife and I also finally finished listening to The Midnight Feast, which is the latest Lucy Foley book. We've listened to every Lucy Foley book on audiobook together, and we had started this one up, I want to say, toward the beginning of the year. It might have even been last year, and we've been kind of off and on picking it up. Finally, I got it through Libby with this special like skip the line feature where we only had it for a week. It was down to the last day, and we were like, we just have to sit down and listen to this for like 5 hours. And so we did that, got through with the story. And I have to say, like, within the collection of Lucy Foley books, this is probably one of my favorites. I'm not quite sure if I like this one more than the guest list, but it's definitely up there. It was a lot of fun. I mean, Lucy Foley, more power to her. She's managed to find a way to write essentially the same story over and over again, and like still make it fresh enough and interesting enough that I want to read them, and I think that they're fun to go through. And honestly, the one that I've liked the least has been the one that deviates the most from that formula, which is the Paris apartment. So like, I don't want her to do something different. I like the way that she writes, but they are very samey. So here again we have a collection of characters, first person narration, and that someone's going to get murdered. That it's going to be the most terrible person in the book, and that everybody in the book is going to have some sort of motivation or reason to kill this person because they're so terrible. And I've got to say, like, of all the books, I feel like this one has the antagonist that I hate the most. There's nothing redeeming about her. She's absolutely awful. And not only that, but she's also like tricked herself into believing that she's a good person and that like she's doing good things, but like from an objective standpoint, no, she's just an awful human being. So this one is set in a remote location, or in some way cut off, just like all the other books are. Here we are in a retreat, and it is out in the woods. These woods have kind of bizarre history, and some like supernatural elements seep into the storytelling. I did appreciate that ultimately, while there were explanations for some of the supernatural elements, it still was left open somewhat that they could have been real. I really dislike when books introduce that supernatural element and then completely walk it back and show that it wasn't, there was no greater force or there was no entity, that kind of thing. Here, I feel like it was handled very well, where an explanation was given of how this could be kind of a mundane occurrence, but ultimately it's up to you to decide if there was some sort of greater power at work here, because there is the crows that live out in the woods, and they are implied to be this supernatural force that attacks evil, that goes after people who are corrupt. Again, you get a wide cast of characters here. Several of the guests have ties to one another, and the fun of the story is seeing how that unfolds and seeing how all these strangers gradually come to learn of the connections in their pasts. For some, I think this is going to be a hard pill to swallow, because you do have every single character that's named essentially having some sort of connection, but it is presented as a rather insular community, and just by virtue of most of the characters being from that area, it makes sense that most of them would know each other and have some sort of history with each other. I also really liked how many different reveals this book had at the end. It didn't feel forced like some titles do, where they're just like twist after twist, and it becomes like, difficult to follow or stretches credulity. Here, I think because Lucy Foley is so adept at writing these types of stories, there's a way of foreshadowing these different events that makes it to where when you get to the point where the reveal happens, you can look back and say, look at this thing here, look at this point, this really does make sense. I think this would probably be, if not my favorite, then my second favorite of the Lucy Foley books that we've read. I think we've got all of them. We've looked at The Guest List, The Hunting Party, Paris Apartment. We've looked at this one. I'm trying to think if there are any others that I'm missing. But it's either this or The Guest List. If you're looking at a Lucy Foley book, those would be the two that I would take a look at. And of course, this one is highly recommended for me. If you're into a kind of mystery that unravels, you can solve certain things. So it's not really a whodunit, because there isn't like a body at the beginning and then you're trying to like solve the crime, but there are different facets of the story that you can predict, because again, there is so much work put into the craft of foreshadowing what's going on in the story. I read through another young reader comic with the Legend of Brightblade. This is the story of a bard who is also a prince, but doesn't want to be a prince, wants to be a bard. They are the son of a former adventurer. This is very, very D&D coded. So it starts off with the original adventuring party besting a dragon, jumps into the future. Now the leader of that band is a ruler over a kingdom, and they are having difficulty with their son, who just wants to follow in the footsteps of another one of the band, the original band from years ago, become a bard and go and have adventures. But at this point, his mother is more concerned with diplomacy and like the bigger picture of how to help the world, that she is worried about her son like going on adventures. She needs him here. The best work they can do is to be discussing with the, I can't remember if they're goblins or what, but there's a society of antagonistic creatures that they are on the verge of making an alliance with, and if her son will just like calm down and stay home, then and behave himself, then they could, they would be doing better at this diplomatic relationship. And he just wants to go on an adventure, and so he sneaks away he finds some like-minded souls in his adventure, all of them bards. Terrible party idea, but it works here. Within this universe, when you play music as a bard, you can actually manifest different creatures and things. So as you can see from the cover here, they're like creating this dragon from the raw magic of their music playing. And they find that there is an evil party of bards roaming around the country and perfecting this music that makes people turn against each other and fight one another. And so it's the story of the son trying to find his place in the world, trying to convince his mother that there are still small threats out there. It's not always about the big picture. Sometimes you have to focus on like what's happening right now. It is simple, but it is also a lot of fun, and I would recommend it for anybody who is a fan of D&D, or if you want a cute story for your kids about, the gaps between our generations and how sometimes parents just don't listen and don't understand, told in a fun way that I think would resonate with any kid who's a fan of fantasy and adventure. And my final read over the past 2 weeks was The Gunslinger by Stephen King. This is the first in the Dark Tower series. It is considered his magnum opus, and I didn't like it very much, unfortunately. I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this, but this one ended up at 3 stars for me, so I liked it okay. I was really expecting to be blown away. I've not read much Stephen King, if at all. I think I might have read some short stories from him, but he's an author that I respect, greatly respect his craft, and the fact that he talks about, I will quote him saying that he's not paid to write books, he's paid to finish them. But I just didn't care for this. I felt like the beginning of 75% of the book was just moving way too slow. This is a story told on an alternate Earth. There are some similarities with our own, particularly the Bible, which I found interesting. The Bible and religion follow in all these different worlds that they reference. But we are in a wasteland desert with the gunslinger who is pursuing the man in black, that famous first line. And that is the whole of the story, really, is this pursuit and the eventual coming to a head of the gunslinger and the man in black meeting at the end of this book. And that's where things get really good. The chase itself is very dry. Not a whole lot is explained to acclimate yourself to this world, which is generally fine. I've read a lot of books where that is the case and has been fun, but here there's also not a lot of action to draw your attention. There's not a lot of exploration of the world. There's numerous scenes that just are very slowly plotted, and generally the way that the story takes shape is the gunslinger talking about an event that happened in the past. So when he first starts up, he meets this guy who's asking him about what happened in Tull. So his first flashback story is his time in Tull, which flashback stories are fine, but they also carry the problem of that it's where the story is going to end up. You've already seen after the events, so you can't have any kind of shock or surprise. And again, the way the story is told is just very plotting and very slow. Later on, the gunslinger finds this kid, Jake, who seems like he comes from, if not our world, then one that is very close to our world. And he explains his backstory. The kid tells a story about where he's from, kind of. And then we have the Gunslinger telling his like origin story. How did he become the Gunslinger? The entire time all these stories are being told, we're slowly catching up to the Man in Black. The Man in Black conflict at the end of this story is really what grabs your attention. And I've heard, because I was a little worried, I was like, I didn't love this. This wasn't amazing. And this is supposed to be like the big thing from Stephen King of like his interconnected universe. When I went online to look at reviews, there were some people saying that this does a good job of kind of setting up the world, but the subsequent books are better at, you know, exploring it and giving you that action that I think was missing in this one. So I'm going to try book number 2. And then we'll see from there. This is one of the 10 series I was looking at to kind of dabble in this year. And so far, I've been impressed enough with all of them to continue. Definitely going to be checking out more of Dune. I'm going to look more at this one. But I think the most successful one so far has been the Sun Eater series. I really liked book 1, even though it was very dense and a lot happened in that story. Also felt very what's the word? Like it felt like there wasn't a clear direction of where the story was going until the very end. But at least there, I really enjoyed the ride we were on as we were going, and it was kind of fun to be like, oh, what's going to happen next? Here in Gunslinger, I didn't get that sense. I was more feeling like, when are we going to get to something happening? When are we going to get to something beyond just these endless flashbacks? So, but I'm still going to try book 2. I still want to give this one a shot. And again, it sounds like the first book's entire purpose is setting up this character's backstory, setting up some key events in the narrative, and then enticing you in that last 25% with, you know, these broader ideas and these bigger themes. We talk about what I believe is going to be the main antagonist. We talk about the tower. What is the tower? And I think from here we can really open up and explore the world a little bit more in the subsequent books. So looking forward to that. And that's what I've read for the last 2 weeks. Thanks for coming by and listening to me ramble about these various titles. As always, I hope your reading journey is going well. Please leave a like if you liked the video. Subscribe if you want to see more. Help us grow this corner of our BookTube community. And until the next one, take care.